Stop scrolling for a second. Take a break from the politics, all the rest of the noise. If you work in pest control, this might save you a couple of callbacks this coming week. Uh, Most of the pest control problems that we have, or most of the callbacks that we get in pest control, are not the pest that is the problem. Einstein said if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend most of that time understanding the problem before trying to solve it. In pest control, we have a tendency to do exactly the opposite. We show up, we grab our stuff, and we start going to work before we've even diagnosed what's going on. So if you don't properly diagnose the problem, more importantly, if you don't properly diagnose your customer before you treat, you're going to spend the rest of the time chasing the problem instead of solving the issue. And so like I said, most of the callbacks in pest control are not a result of the pest. They're a result of poor communication on our part to our customers, right? So listen, pest control is 80 to 90% about communication, really 10, 15% of it. At the very high end, 20% of it is the actual treatment process. Treatment is only one part of the solution. Really what we're looking for is we're not looking to show up on the scene as the Lone Ranger. We're looking to show up on the scene and get some cooperation from our client to help them to solve their problem so they can clearly see the path to the desired end, right? What they really want. So treating what you see instead of what is actually happening causes a lot of problems. We have a tendency in pest control, and if you've been in pest control for a long time, like I have, you even have a tendency sometimes to walk into a situation, immediately see this, see that, or even just hear one or two phrases from a customer and immediately fit them into a box and say, oh, I know exactly what I need to do here. Right. Good example of that is, listen, German roaches, I do a lot of apartment complex, you do a lot of multifamily dwellings, right? You walk in, you kind of have an idea in your head already what's going on, what you're going to do, what your prime sources are, all of that kind of stuff before you've ever walked through the front door. You don't need to talk to them. You just want them to leave so that you can get to work, so that you can get it out of there, because you think that's how you're going to maximize your profit. When the reality is you do need to communicate with that customer. You really need that customer's help, right? It's not, German roaches is not about spraying. That is one part of that solution, but it's not the only part of that solution. If you've done this for a long time, you know that that's true, right? Rodents, having a rodent problem in a unit or in a home isn't always just about throwing a trap here or throwing a trap there, and that'll resolve the issue. There's a lot more involved in this, and a lot of times we need we need to communicate with our customers better because we need their communication with us to help us diagnose their problem better. We also need, beyond just that, we need their participation in sometimes doing some different things, right? In German roach situations, pulling everything out of their cabinets. Sometimes that means drying up water in certain areas, making sure that they police their food, that they clean and sanitize areas. There's a lot of cooperation that has to happen in these situations. So this communication is really the key. Diagnosing the problem is really what's going to fix it. If you don't diagnose it, you're going to die out there. And so, listen, we know the symptoms, but we don't always know the issue when we walk into some of these situations. And so, right, if you don't identify where the issue is coming from, if you don't discuss sanitation with the customer, you don't give them a good timeline for what to expect, the customer assumes that this is going to be one and done. You're going to come in, you'll spray everything, and that will resolve their problem. You sprayed it, done. But that's not the way that it works in German roaches. We all know that. And there's many other pests that work the exact same way that are just not one and done. And so the customer often is very frustrated by that. That's why you're getting that callback, is they're frustrated by the fact that they had an expectation and we didn't communicate with them well enough to realize what their expectation was. And so we didn't communicate with them properly to let them know that their expectation was not realistic, and that we want to give them a more realistic expectation. Listen, basically 5 questions I think you need to ask when you walk into one of these situations. Most of these questions are not actually about the pest. They're more about getting cooperation from your client, right? So the first question I think you got to ask when you walk in is, what are you seeing and when are you seeing it? Or what are you hearing and when are you hearing it when it comes to a rodent problem, right? Because a couple of things matter. The location of the pest obviously matters. It's going to help you streamline your process. It's also going to help you search for other areas, right? Search for other issues. If somebody tells me that they're having German roaches in their bedroom, in their dresser in their bedroom, that's going to make a little light go off in my head, right? That's not an unusual thing. What is different about your bedroom? Why are we having this issue in your bedroom? Right? And so that's going to cause me to shift my focus a little bit. The time of day matters a lot. Matters in insect issues, but it matters more. That applies more sometimes in your rodent control. If they're telling you that they're hearing rodents in the middle of the day, it's a pretty good chance it's not rats, right? Pretty good chance that maybe they have a squirrel or something like that. It might be a rodent. It might be a rat, right? It is still possible, but it's going to change my focus a little bit. It's going to cause me to do a little bit more investigation in some areas. And so the pattern that they're noticed that they can help you identify with the problem that they're having matters more than just what they're seeing or what they called you out there to treat for. It allows you to basically to immediately separate the one-off issue from the problem that's been an ongoing problem, right? Sometimes people don't realize that they have roaches until they see something, right? They see one in their bathroom or something like that. But when you show up, you pull the refrigerator out, and right, the refrigerator behind the refrigerator is packed with roaches or something like that. It helps you, right, to know, hey, you know what, like this is that area, right? Your bathroom is one part of this issue, but the main source of your issue is over here, right? And so it helps you to identify those things. You want to know how long the situation has been going on. New issues are different than old issues. And new issues may have a very different timeline than old issues have. And so you want to be able to set realistic timelines for them as to what they're looking at in order to get this situation under control. You can't do that if you don't know how long that they've had the issue. It also helps to give them context when you're trying to tell them, listen, you've had a German roach problem for the last 2 years, and it's going to take me, some weekly follow-ups here, 3 or 4 weekly follow-ups to get these under control. Helps them to understand that context a little bit better, and it prevents a false sense of urgency on their part as well as on your part, right? It prevents that false sense of urgency on their part, of them thinking to themselves that, right, you're going to come in, you're going to spray, this is all going to be done. Also prevents you from having to feel like, right, I've got to resolve this in one shot here. And so sometimes you got to ask yourself you got to ask yourself, what have you already done in this situation, in situations that are similar to this? More important question, though, is asking your customer what they've already done to try to resolve this situation. That really matters. Especially in some situations, they are using a competing material, right? You're putting down something that is non-repellent, and they're spraying repellents, and that is, right, causing everything to move away from your non-repellent material, and you're not getting the effect that you think that you're going to get. You're not getting the kill that you're looking for. And so a lot of times the do-it-yourselfers will sabotage our work because they're trying to help us resolve their issue, right? And so you got to ask those questions. Sometimes you got to ask those questions during the process as well. You've got to go to the customer and tell the customer, right? Last week when I was here, right, you were having an issue here. Now it seems to have spread to there. Have you been spraying with something? It's one of the reasons I always pay attention to what people have underneath their sinks when I'm doing my inspections. It tells you an awful lot, right? If I come in and treat with a non-repellent, they come behind me and spray with Raid. They've just negated everything that I did, right? And so I've had that even with apartment complex managers who will go in after you and set off bombs because they're going to help you out, right? And so it doesn't really help out a whole lot, right? And so that question all by itself will prevent a lot of anxiety on your part as to why you're not able to get this situation under control as quickly as you thought that you were going to get it under control. You also want to know, kind of, listen, what does it look like for me to resolve this issue for you? Right, with rodents and stuff like that, right? Sometimes customers have a very different expectation than you have about how to resolve this issue. Uh, if you've ever been out on a rodent job, you've had the question asked of you at some point. Uh, if you, well, do you clean up the droppings and stuff like that, right? So you want to know what actually looks like me resolving this issue for you. And so some ways to phrase that, right, would be, listen, what's your definition of a solution here? What's your definition of fixed? What are you expecting this to look like when I'm done? Right, what are you hoping happens, right, to before I leave? Those are, right, pretty simple questions that don't put a lot of pressure on your client, but helps to expose whether they've got an unrealistic expectation. It prevents the silent disappointment, right? That they may be quiet about it in the moment, but you and I both know they won't be quiet about it forever. And it will determine sometimes whether the job even is a good fit for you. Sometimes you got to walk away from some things because they expect you to come in and do a one and done, and you can't do a one and done. And a lot of times we will take those jobs because we think to ourselves they're quick money. And so we go in, we do a one and done, doesn't resolve the issue. You end up 4, 5, and 6 weeks into a process that you shouldn't have ever got yourself involved in. Customers still not happy because they're not the type of customer that can be satisfied. But you didn't ask enough questions, or I didn't ask enough questions to find that out before we got ourselves involved in the situation, right? So listen, here, the other thing you want, the fifth part of it, I think, is this, right? Is setting out, this is what this is going to look like, right? Here's what I need from you, right? And basically laying it at their feet. Listen, are you willing to help out in this? And there's a lot of ways to do that, right? But the best way to do it, right, is basically explaining to the customer, listen, I'm a part of the solution, but I am not the entire solution. Part of this solution is the prep work that has to be done, and I can't do the prep work. You're the one who's got to pull stuff out of your cabinets. You're the one that has to ensure in between services that, right, the food and things like that are not being left out, and that we're staying on top of sanitation and these types of things. And so sometimes it's hard to get customers to understand what a big part that they play in this, but they really do. And so this is, right, explaining to your customer this is a multi-treatment process, right? Same thing with rats, right? I'm going to put a trap in your attic. Sometimes they hit it the first day. Sometimes they don't hit it for 2 weeks. Sometimes, right, I'm chasing a rat for a month because he's almost been caught on a trap before and he knows what it is and he doesn't want anything to do with it. And so it's making sure that they understand, hey, you and I are in this together, right? When I've got to be able to get information from you, right, in order to help you solve your problem here. It's getting that customer participation, right? And so the customer is often involved in this process. Most of the time it's in the area of sanitation and information, providing information to you. But sometimes it's little maintenance things that they need to do, right? If you're having a problem with a German roach job, you go in to do a German roach job, and you pull out the refrigerator and there's water on the floor. And listen, you can spray all you want, but they're going to continue to have a German roach problem until they get that issue resolved. And so sometimes it's a maintenance issue as well, right? It's not blaming them. It's not shaming them, right? Well, if you weren't so dirty, you wouldn't have this problem, or right? It's not doing that kind of stuff. It's explaining to them, listen, right? We all got to live in our homes, and that is, right, part of this process. But for the course of this treatment, here's the help that I need from you. I need you to do the X, Y, Z. Right? And if you frame it as though you're working together, most of the time they will understand that, right? It's a shared responsibility when it comes to pest control. And sometimes we're scared to communicate that to our customers because we feel like they're paying us, and, right, we should just be able to, right, we should just do whatever it is they want so that we can get their money and get out of there. but you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not making yourself look like a professional by any stretch of the imagination. If I ran my car out of oil, then took it to my mechanic and said, "Well, I don't know what you did the last time that you did my oil change, but it obviously didn't work because my car's broke down." You think that my mechanic is going to go, "Oh, I am so sorry. Let me pay for your engine"? Right? That's not what's going to happen. And so, right, I've got to participate in this process. I got to pay attention to what's going on with my vehicle. Right? Your customers have to pay attention to what's going on with their pest problems as well. Right, I'll give you a couple of examples. If I go into an apartment complex, right, I'm going to do a German roach treatment. I pull out their refrigerator and there's water leaking on the floor. Here's how I'm one part of this process, right? I'm not going to fix the refrigerator. That is either the tenants got to fix it, or possibly maintenance, right, or management has to fix it. Then there's the sanitation issue of making sure that, right, they don't leave food out on their counters, that they're wiping down their stoves, that kind of thing. That's a sanitation issue. That ends up being the tenant's responsibility. Then I come in and either bait or I treat. That's my part of this. And so there's multiple steps to this, and there's also multiple roles, right, or responsibilities involved in this process. And so the success or failure of this process does not just rest on my shoulders. It rests on our collective shoulders, and whether we're all going to do our part in order to get this situation under control. And this might sound like pie in the sky, but this is, right, I run my own pest control company, and which basically means I own my own paycheck, but this is how I do business. And I have great success with apartment complexes because I do business this way. And yes, sometimes it takes a little while for a manager to understand, right, how I'm trying to help and how I'm trying to give them the ability, right, to sometimes to move tenants out, because tenants don't want to participate in the process. And if the tenant doesn't want to participate in the process, this problem is just going to spread to other units. And eventually you're going to have multi-million-dollar, right, lawsuits that come out of these things on your hands. And then you're going to wish that, right, you listened to somebody like me who said, "Hey, this is a process and we all got to participate together. We got to work together on this thing." After they go to court a couple times with your paperwork that says, "Hey, the tenant needs to do this, I will do this," and right after they go to court a couple times with your paperwork like that, you know what they're going to do? They're going to start referring you to everybody else too, right? And so listen, you can guarantee your work. What you can't guarantee is, I can't guarantee a rodent's behavior. I can't guarantee my customer's behavior. All right, so I can guarantee my work. If I do exclusion work, I can say, "Hey, look, I'll give you a year on the exclusion work," right? But I can't guarantee that you'll never have a rat again. Like that's not a realistic thing. And sometimes we get ourselves into trouble trying to guarantee people these types of things in order to get a signature on a piece of paper. Most of us, if you've been in pest control for a long time, and you were a part of the go and blow days, right, back in the 90s, right, or even the early 2000s, where sales guys were telling people that we would crawl underneath their houses and spray for stuff and all that kind of crazy nutso stuff. You showed up to some of those, and you're trying to explain to the customer that that's not what we do. We don't have the equipment for doing that kind of thing, right? You know what it's like. And so, right, it is. You can only guarantee your work, and you're responsible for your work. Listen, what changes when you do this the right way is, right, that your callbacks obviously drop off very significantly. Your stress level comes down because you're no longer taking on responsibility for things that you should not be taking on responsibility for. Feeling like you're having to defend your treatment process, that kind of goes away. The customer begins to trust the process. And as they begin to trust the process, their level of participation increases. That your revenue begins to improve because you're not doing more work. You're doing less work, right? You're under a lot less stress as well. Your confidence comes up, and you no longer feel like you're the Lone Ranger, right? Like you're out there, on your own. And so, listen, you've got to stop reacting to what's happening at a customer's house, and start helping them to understand what's going on. and start helping them to understand the process towards a solution. So listen, uh, next time that you show up at your customer's house, next time that you show up to an issue, right, to a problem, I'm not talking about just, treating the exteriors for general maintenance, but even then, right, the first question I ask when I show up at a house is, listen, right, how have things been since the last time that I was here? I want to know if they're having problems. I want to address those things. That's what they're paying for me for. That's what I'm here for. And so, but next time you show up at an issue, use these 5 questions, right, to help you go through just a small, right, quick diagnostic with them, help to diagnose that problem, pinpoint what needs to be done, pinpoint how you can help them. If you will diagnose the issue before you treat it, and communicate before before you move on with the process, and clearly set the path out in front of them before you get started, you're going to find that your customer's a lot more satisfied, you're a lot less stressed, and you're going to make more money as a result of it. Thanks for being a part of Pest Profits today. Like and subscribe. Share this with somebody who you feel like would benefit from it, and have a great day.